Hope you're well. Hope you're well. So, let's see. It's interesting doing rideshare. I've been doing it now for a few weeks. Yeah, more than a few weeks. And it's it's interesting. It's a challenge in some ways. Had a guy today that got in the vehicle. Well, I pulled up. I found the location was a little bit strange, but pulled up, found the location, found the guy, and he had a couple of big bags. And so I got out and was helping him load, and it seemed like a good energy, good interaction, or at least I tried to be kind, help, and got the bags loaded into the car. He gets in the car and he's got this mug of coffee, drinks, and food in other people's cars. It just it shocks me. It shocks me sometimes. Just the disregard, the ways people can be just so inconsiderate, and in such a kind of, I don't know if banal is the right word, but just such a like their default setting is just so kind of inconsiderate and oblivious. Anyways, maybe I don't know if I want to say it that way, but yeah. So he's got this coffee cup and it's got a lid, but he's just like, it's not screwed on right, or he's just being really careless. I don't know what, but I look back as he's getting in, and there's just coffee all over the seats. Now, this is my livelihood, right? And keeping a nice ride is not just for the person in the car, it's for all the riders to come. And so something like that does matter. Has to matter. It does matter. And it would matter to me even if it wasn't for doing it for rideshare. I mean, I like my stuff. I try to take care of my stuff. I mean, it's kind of that simple. It's funny how little it takes to, like, I think sometimes as a passenger, your job is so easy. Really, in order to be a good passenger, whatever that means, a good passenger, to do a good job in that role as a passenger, just get in the car and shut up. I don't actually mean that, but you just sit there. I mean, you don't, and that's what's kind of so crazy about it is you just see there are so many neutral customers, so many that are maybe not your favorite, but you get through the ride, and quite a few that are pretty good, and a couple that are really nice passengers to give a ride to. But it's not a hard thing, I don't think. I mean, I've done it many times. I've been a passenger many times, and I just get in, I'm respectful, sit down, buckle my seatbelt, and just relax and go to the place. But people can't do that. People just can't do that. And it's, anyways, but yeah, especially with like food and drink, it's like, this isn't your vehicle. This is somebody else's vehicle, personal vehicle that they're taking you. So I'm respectful to start out with. Definitely, definitely, definitely. Kind as best as I can, respectful, considerate, try to be thoughtful. Um, but that's not the world we live in, you may have noticed. But I do things preparatory to picking somebody up. I've developed this message that I send out to everybody that I pick up, and it's just a few sentences. I say, "Hey, welcome. I appreciate your business." And I don't know exactly how I phrased it, but that no open drinks, no soda cans. I say, if you have a drink with a lid on it, that's okay. Just please be careful, or something like that. No food, no smoking, no vaping. You know, obvious stuff, but you'd be surprised. So I've developed a habit of sending that out prior to picking somebody up, just so that they have a chance to read it. You know, and part of it is I've got to communicate that to people. You know, they may not. It seems obvious to me, but maybe it's not to somebody. So I've taken that step of just explicitly stating it, and it gives them a chance while I'm driving to them to, make, if they have a soda or something, to put it away or to drink it or dispose of it or whatever they choose to do. But it also just kind of sets a tone of like, hey, and I say in the message, like, I got to keep my car nice. Another thing I say is, I crack the window for strong smells. And that's because so many people are stoned in this day and age. It's sad. I think it's very sad. I personally am not a fan of that. I don't think it's a good thing. I've been around it my whole life. I won't even get into all the details there, but very familiar with that habit. Not that it's ever been a habit of mine, but um, yeah, it's sad. A lot of people are just stoned and smell really bad, and I don't want my other passengers to have to deal with that. So or body odor. I mean, cigarettes. I mean, anyways. So in that note that I send out, I say I crack the window for strong smells, and a part of that is just kind of setting a tone, like, hey, this is somebody who values your business on the one hand, but also values what he's doing, right? And he's trying to keep a nice ride. This isn't just get in and destroy the car. No, you're in there for 5 minutes, maybe 30 minutes tops, and then you're gone, and I have to deal with all that. So, anyways, I try to do an ounce of prevention, right? Or whatever that saying is. But anyways, yeah, so back to this guy. Coffee's going everywhere, so I see that, and it's not a good thing, getting coffee stains all over your car. So I point it out, and I get paper towels, and I'm starting to clean it. He doesn't apologize. That's not his energy. Like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Expressing a sense of understanding. Like, hey, I'm destroying your car right now. Sorry about that. That's not the energy. He gets very sort of rude, condescending. He makes a show of dumping out his coffee. He says, "Here, let me take care of this for you," in kind of a rude way. And I think prior to that, actually, because see, I have to make sure people have their seatbelts on. I'm not going to drive somebody who's not buckled up. I think that's the law. Not the law, I think that's the policy for that. But regardless, I just wouldn't do it for all kinds of reasons. It just doesn't make sense to do that. And he kind of scoffs and I always say it politely. And I rarely get pushback. I can't think of any other pushback I've had on this. But this is what I say. I'll say, no rush at all, but I just got to make sure you got your seatbelt before we take off. Kind of scoffs at that and then spilling coffee everywhere. And he goes, wow, you are the most conscientious Lyft driver ever, something. Hard for me to replicate the tone of it, but it comes across condescending, rude, kind of passive aggressive. At that point, I turn around and I say, hey, if you need another ride, I am happy to let you out right now. And he kind of backtracks and says, oh, no, I really appreciate Lyft drivers and all this stuff. Now, I wish in retrospect I would have just stopped it. There was more than enough there to just say, get out of the car. I should have done that. And I really regret, and I'm apologetic to myself that I put myself through that. I didn't get that one right. I should have just, canceled the ride and let him out there before we took off. I didn't. And I noticed this thing happen, and I've tried to talk about this in other videos, and I don't understand it, and it's very frustrating, this thing about life where this is somebody who it's already off to just a pretty dramatically bad start, damage to my car, condescension, all this stuff. It just seems life will punish you. And it seems like it's gotten more severe and more dramatic as time has gone on. It's like the consequences of not. See, I'm trying not to be too harsh on myself just because I don't think that's going to be super useful for me. And I'll explain. There's more to this story that I'll kind of round it out as I go, I think, a little bit. But in retrospect, I definitely think the cleaner thing would have been just to end the ride and give him the boot. I didn't. And it turns out this was an excruciatingly long ride. And I could have bet money that that's how it would be. Hit traffic at exactly the worst possible time on a road that winnowed down to a one-lane road on a ride that was across the city. Brutal, absolutely brutal. I hate that life does that to you, but it tries to maximize. It seems life tries to maximize the torment, the punishment, the pain. And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, infuriating. Man, it was brutal. And so I got there, got his luggage out of the back, kept it minimal, and took off. Now, I reported the incident right away, and there's ways you can do that on the app. You can give them a low rating as a rider. I felt that was appropriate here. I rarely do that. It takes quite a bit for me to do that, but felt well deserved in this case. And you give them a low rating and it blocks them, so I don't have to worry about having that rider again. So that feels nice. That's a good feature. Man, I can still feel how frustrated I am with all this. Man, it was a bad experience. The hostility in the face of having mistreated somebody, it's just so hard to comprehend. And my role in that was to have not taken that on. But anyways, and so I called the app because the thing is, with everything that had happened, I was expecting I'd get a very low rating from this person, undeservedly so. But you just you live long enough, you kind of come to expect stuff like that. And so at the end of the rides I did today, I called up this Lyft support, and And they were helpful, and they were helpful. I can give them credit for that. And it turns out this guy gave me a 5-star rating and gave me a tip. I mean, in a sense, that makes sense because of the, I guess, restraint that I displayed, and I wasn't outright hostile. I think I acted appropriately, although I think I could have gone further and stopped the ride, like I said. But um, I sort of wonder if that wasn't an admission on his part, like, hey, I don't have the emotional intelligence to acknowledge when I totally do something wrong, and or I mean, I don't know. I can't really say, and I don't want to invest too much energy into trying to figure out what's going on in somebody else's mind. But it was odd that that was the rating. Um, but yeah, so I guess made a report on the incident and was able to file. They have a damage report that you can file, and you send in photos, and so I did that, the stains and such, and I did get refunded some money for that experience. So that was great. I felt really that felt great. Man, it was a bad experience. And part of why I don't want to overly criticize myself on stuff like this is because this is hard. Like in the flow of a day, I'd already been working quite a few hours. You don't always get every split decision right. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you get it wrong. And you try to learn from it as best as you can, but there's a way in which you can try to learn. What do I want to say here? It may happen again that I don't get it right. And if I am too rigid about having gotten it wrong now, it's going to doubly hurt then. So I try to be gentle and stick with it and learn and encourage myself long term to, find the wins and find moments of progress and be patient with myself. This is not easy stuff. And the fact is, I have gotten it right in many ways, and this wasn't the worst, but man, this was. I hear myself saying that this was pretty bad. This was pretty bad. Um, but thinking about another experience just a couple days before, I had this woman that came out. I went to pick her up, and you have to assess somebody and weed through a snapshot of details so quickly before you make these decisions. That's another reason why I can't be too hard on myself, because then you also become kind of hyper vigilant, like I'm never going to make that mistake again. Well, I wish that was true, and I do notice progress for sure, but anyways, so this woman comes out and she's kind of like something kind of odd just in her movement. She's kind of shuffling in a weird way, like a little bit like off balance, staggering. Now you can't know for sure just based on that. You think, okay, that's a little bit odd. But people have all kinds of reasons for, I mean, there could be a medical reason, something with their muscles or neurological, or, I mean, you just don't really know. And that could be a reason somebody's taking Uber or Lyft, is because they have some kind of a physical impairment. But you note it, moving kind of slow and kind of an odd way. Comes out, she goes up to her vehicle or a vehicle in the driveway and kisses it, which again, so that's another point of information. That one in my mind, I'm thinking, like, what are some possible explanations here? Could be just an eccentric person, you know? And that's not necessarily a deal breaker. There's eccentric people all over the place, and there's eccentricities in all of us in certain ways. But so those two things strike me as odd. Gets in the vehicle, and at that point, you get a lot more data on somebody. The tone, her tone is kind of abrupt, brash, maybe a little bit. There's a little edge to it. And so I say, hey, how's it going? Good morning, or something like that. Now, her ride has a stop on it, and those are always interesting. A lot of people, there's a time limit, 5 minutes on the app, and that's good that they have that because drivers don't get paid by the hour, they get paid by the ride. And so if you're just sitting there 5, 10, 15 minutes, you're losing money when you could be out getting, another ride. But and I've seen some of that, and so I try to, again, just in a courteous way, but in a way that's respectful to my time and my effort, and just to communicate. I tell people that have that, I say, hey, just you may already recognize this, but just to let you know, it's you have 5 minutes at the stop, and I try to stick with that. And after 5 minutes, I got to keep pushing. And sometimes I might explain a little bit more. I might say, it's because we don't get paid by the hour, or else it'd be less of an issue. We get paid by the ride. And most people understand that. So I mentioned that to her, again, trying to be in a courteous way. And she doesn't really, it doesn't sit well with her. So there's a little attitude that comes along. And I say, okay, well, it's going to be, I can do 5 minutes, and after that I need to leave. Is that going to be all right with you? And she goes, no, not really. But okay, or something. Her eyes, another detail, her eyes are kind of glassy. They got, in a way that to me typically indicates, again, you don't really know, but you're having to kind of sift through a lot of details in a quick snapshot, like I say. And yeah, glassy eyes like that typically is drugs or alcohol. Again, you don't know for sure, but so at that point, all the information, I just say, I don't think this ride is gonna work out. I'm gonna go ahead and let you out. I'm gonna cancel this ride. As before we had gone anywhere or anything like that. And she says, oh well, I already have my seatbelt on. And I say, that's all right. I'm gonna go ahead and cancel. I'm not angry. I'm not yelling. I'm not hostile. Just direct, firm. She unbuckles it, upset, cusses me out, F word this, or I don't know what she says exactly. Well, no, yeah, she does say the F word to me, and leaves. And I felt pretty good. I felt pretty good after that. That for me is progress, That seems like a no brainer for a lot of people, I think. But I didn't have a lot of that kind of boundary setting and stuff modeled for me at all. In fact, I had the opposite modeled, and shame around setting boundaries. And so it's been a long, long road. And to be able to do something like that, and to do it felt like in a very skillful, surgical way almost, but a skillful way, let's say. Assessing it, keeping my calm, and just, expressing what needed to be expressed. I left that ride feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good. And I've had a few other experiences with stuff like that, and a couple that I just have gotten wrong. Not entirely wrong. And compared to a previous point, I can see how I did better than I would have done at a previous point in my life. But so, yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm still frustrated with this experience. mostly I think with myself. I need to get better at just stopping something at the beginning like that. I think that's the skill. Um, and these are, yeah, got this weird push and pull inside me around being too didactic because there is a there is something inside me that wants to pull back, from the specifics and make some larger points. But something inside me, another thing inside me is like, I don't know, maybe it's just more useful to be really specific. And if there's a message in there that can be useful to somebody else, maybe that's enough. Because I could say, that there are lessons in boundary setting and relationships and that are applicable. See, yeah, it doesn't even feel right to go down that road. Sorry, just have to be honest. Anyways, let me see if there's anything else I do want to say here. Yeah, there was another ride I had today. Gosh, it's funny because there's well, let me describe what happened. I picked up this guy. He was going for a medical treatment and very talkative, moving into invasive. I am much more in the other direction. Not rude, not unkind, and I do try to talk a bit. you know. I don't want to present like an image of coldness. It's not that energy, but I'm so content with quietness, so content with silence, and a lot of passengers are totally prefer that and are comfortable with that, and that's fine with me. Sometimes I'll get into a little bit of a conversation with somebody, but often there's a skill here in recognizing who's going to deplete your energy. And sometimes when I'm already a little bit emotionally depleted, I don't have as strong of a capacity, strong of a, sometimes somebody will get in and just very wound up energy, and I just am able to kind of stay still, move slow, stay in my own energy. And typically that's because I'm well rested and have digested whatever's going on for me emotionally. And those rides leave less of a residue. But sometimes because I'm tired from everything else going on and I just don't have that fortitude, or I don't do as good of a job putting up those energetic boundaries. And so that's something to work on that I got to get better at, that I continue to work on, that I do okay with. But anyways, this guy, yeah, I had that sense initially, and part of what it requires is a little bit of awkwardness, and that you have to kind of break the social script by giving a short answer or by just, you don't have to necessarily respond to a comment somebody makes. You can maybe nod a little bit, or, you know, not every comment needs to be responded to. And so you there's a, if you want to say a cost, but there's sometimes a little bit of a social awkwardness that has to happen in order to kind of break that momentum that somebody has, that they're bringing. And again, you don't do it in a rude way. It probably sounds that way if I'm describing it, but um, and so I didn't do as good a job with this, and the questions just kept coming. So how long you been driving for? What hours do you work? How many hours a day? Some of that, and again, it's an energetic thing depending on the person. There's been times I've had conversations with somebody who I felt was kind of energetically stable. They weren't, chaotic, or I got the sense I wouldn't feel depleted talking to them. That they kind of were in their own energy and just kind of in a respectful way, curious about, I didn't get that impression with this guy, and the questions just kept coming. And then at one point he goes, "So, are you married? You have kids?" It's like, dude, come on. But again, people just don't have that kind of consciousness or awareness sometimes, or care or consideration, or who knows. You can't expect the world to have that kind of carefulness that you may have. You just, you can expect it, but that's not the world that we find ourselves in at all. And so at that point, I did speak up, and I said, I, I try to keep my personal life separate from what I'm doing here, or something like that. I hate to say it, but you are always worried with your pushbacks with customers about getting ratings bombed, even if it's a totally reasonable pushback or whatever, boundary. And so, yeah, there's a risk to doing it, of course. And even if there was no ratings, there's still a social risk to kind of setting a boundary with somebody. Even if it's not a major one, you still feel it because you're kind of having to interrupt where somebody's at. Like, hey, we're not going there. And so I said that, and it was fine. It was fine. The other thing is, though, you give rides to people if you're working the same zone, and if you're doing it often, you may end up picking up the same people again. And so you don't want to establish this precedent of intrusiveness and like over familiarity with somebody that you're just giving a ride to. It's not that I hate this person or think ill of this person. No, not at all. But I'm just providing a service. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to try to be friendly, but I'm not your friend. I'm not really looking to make friends, really. I don't think that's a bad, harsh thing to say. I try to just be respectful and get somebody safely to where they're going. I think that's really my only responsibility, to be totally honest. And so I need to lean more into that. And I do an okay job with that, but it makes it harder if you haven't set those boundaries early and up front. It kind of establishes this momentum. And if you pick them up again, there's this kind of over familiarity. And again, with some people, it just doesn't feel appropriate because they're overly intrusive and overly familiar with you. And I don't like that. I don't think that's a good thing, I don't think it comes from a good place inside people, to be totally honest. That's not really my primary focus. And as I've said before, I try not to get into other people's minds. I try to just stay with what's true for me and set the boundaries that are helpful for me. But Um, and so, yeah, I didn't do a great job with that initially because I had the sense the moment the guy got in that here's somebody I need to be a little bit more minimal with, but I didn't do a very good job with that. It's funny how subtle these things are if you're paying attention, and you can avoid so much if you get it right at the beginning. Now that in and of itself is a little bit of a there's an asterisk there that kind of because you can become hyper vigilant, and that's not good either. So there's like this dance of being relaxed, being comfortable, but also being alert. And part of that is all the stuff you do in your life outside of that moment, getting good rest, emotionally de-stressing, digesting, getting stuff out of your system so that the momentum in you kind of dies down. There's less for it to catch on to with kind of chaotic personalities. And there's a perfectionism that creeps in for sure around all this. And so that's another thing that I try to, it's like I'm never going to get it right. Unfortunately, I try to get better at it. And I think, again, it's like were I to jump my timeline from a few years ago to now, I'd see a big improvement. But yeah, there's still things I'm working on. And anyways, I'm tired. Jesus Christ, restore your children here on this planet. Give good rest. Lord, I thank you for the many blessings in my life. May you bless all of creation, Lord. Forgive me my many mistakes. Help me to heal, Lord. Help me to act in a way that is safe and good. Flood this earth with your grace, Lord, with your mercy, with your peace, your strength. Jesus Christ, we pray to you in your mighty, mighty name, the name of God Most High, the name of our almighty Savior. May it be so in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, take care. Take care.